Thank you very much. So we would like to have another discussion, a second session. We have just 20 minutes, but we had a good discussion now, so I didn't want to stop it. Okay, then we would like to move to the design education topic.
Right. Would you like to have a seat?
Okay, this is the future of design education around the world in 80 questions. And we would like to discuss on this project. Would you like to explain why and how you did?
I just touched it briefly, right? Maybe you remember when I said we are owned by the iF Design Foundation. And this design foundation was set up 1.5 years ago. And the first project of this foundation was an education project, the future of design education. So what we did was creating 80 questions. So we asked people, we asked friends, we asked friends in other countries and said, we need 80 questions to address this issue. So this was the outcome. And now we do 8 to 10 hearings. So the first one was in Germany, the next one will be in US. I think the third one will be in Kyoto, and so on and so on. So in different countries, on different continents, and we want to ask the questions and discuss the questions, right? So it doesn't mean we want answers for every question, but we wanted to create a big picture and say, okay, what's necessary? And we have hired one person who is leading this entire process and all the hearings and everything. And he's the one working on the final book, the white book that I mentioned. So by end of 2020, we will finish the hearings, and then he's going to work on the book, the final book. And in May 21, the book will be introduced in the international conference. So that's the background of it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And we have 80 questions. Yeah. And I selected around 15 questions from 80 because we don't have enough time today. So the first question, and maybe you can, and maybe we don't have enough time to discuss all of the questions. So I would like to try to have some questions, and if you want to discuss about another question, you can raise your hand, and I would like to talk the number. Okay. So the first question, and then the number 6. So we were told that design is neither art or handicraft, but has peripheral points of contact with both areas. A question to you: how important is it to determine the relationships or connections between art, design, and handicraft for successful design practice? I selected this question because we will found a new course, and we have art classes, and then also some handicrafts in workshop. And that's why I would like to ask or discuss with you. Would you like to add some comments?
Here I would really love to know from the students what they think. Because this is, at least it's about the future of your profession, right? How important is this relation for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay, I can speak well. Actually, that's exactly what I'm doing with Ikeda right now over here. And in Germany, actually, it's not really important, but it has to be, actually. And here, it's really important. A lot of companies are based on this system.
Would you say it varies from country to country?
Yes.
So there's not a simple yes or simple no. You would say in this country more than in that country.
Yeah, they're actually really more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you say you have to do that in Germany?
Because
You don't want to do it.
Everything is already existing. You can't design something new. 100 years ago, something was designed like that, but you just refresh it. You just redesign it. Maybe you don't know that it's already existing, but it is.
You don't want to change it?
Of course, of course. But like the mix between the new technology and handicraft is the important thing to make something really, really good, in my opinion.
Yeah, any other opinion and thoughts?
I think it is very important to learn art and handicraft because even if you have new technologies, you still have to have user interface and user experience designs. And also, for industrial design, it is very, very important, personally, for car design.
Yeah.
Yeah, first you all have to be able to express what you're thinking in your head and what your customers want to feel. So I don't think it's possible to teach them in separate parts.
I think both of you are very right. So I don't need the mic, no, thank you. I think both of you are very correct. Yes, in some countries it's difficult to imagine. On the other hand, we lose the skills of the remaining craft, for example, in Germany, right? You cannot find a good shoemaker in Germany. Nobody wants to be a shoemaker, that's impossible. Even shoe repair is very difficult to get done, right? Nowadays, I mean, most people wear sneakers. Usually sneaker you don't repair, right? You throw it away and you buy new ones. But let's say the good old shoe, usually it was repaired or handmade. Tradition is gone. I think it's a pity because we lose some skills. In Asia, whenever I travel to Asia, I was in Thailand 2 weeks ago, everything comes from craft and they are super good in defining the best material for something, in execution and using the material in the best possible way. So they make wonderful products. I mean, here you have scissor makers, knife makers. Usually this tradition will die one day because none of you wants to be a knife maker. None of you wants to be a scissor maker. So the question is, do we lose it, right? And just have industrialized knives and anything like that, scissors and so on and so on? Or is it worth keeping the tradition in some way? I think there will be one day when we will urgently miss all those skills. But this is just a gut feeling. Right now everybody could say, come on, you can do any knife in an industrial production process as well. Yes, I cannot say no. But my feeling is one day we will miss those skills if we give up on it. So, and I know many furniture designers, first of all, they learned how to treat wood, right? And to understand wood, right? What's possible? How can I bend it? What is possible with wood? And no matter if it's contenting rigid or all these guys, right? They all in some way learned something about the material they want to work with. I think these are the better designers because they understand the material they use.
Any other thoughts, opinion?
I also think about these connections very, very important. But I had an experience that I'm exchange student in Germany, and also I joined a lot of projects in this university. But there are a lot of students who ignore handicraft or the handicraft aspects. I feel that's wrong, but I don't know the reason. But my feeling is it's important. I don't know. There's specific reason that I just feel.
But there is a word, thinking by hand.
True.
Yeah. And do you think in handicraft and art are related to your creativity?
Yeah.
100%. All right. Perhaps I think it's okay for the mic.
I'm just trying to encourage the mic because we're recording the
Oh,
voice.
okay. So maybe I use the mic because that's recording. Thank okay, I'm not a student, but perhaps I'm just looking at it in a kind of separate perspective. So if we separate education and of course the industrial practice, so I'm not sure because of course in university education you're preparing students for practice, right? But I mean university education is still education. So perhaps if we are just talking about just gearing towards just preparing students for the industry, then definitely, then perhaps looking at the needs of the industry, perhaps students may not need handicraft, things like that. But if we look at the educational sense, where design is experimentation, students get to try out different materials, different kind of manufacturing processes, not just based on technological machines and things like that, then the connections between art, design, and handicraft becomes a very kind of valuable learning experience. So I guess if we look at education in a sense, then definitely there will be value for it. So perhaps education and industry perhaps still need certain kind of division or definition. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
I think you really got the point very well. So sorry, I don't know your name. That's why I have to say you. But as the young lady here just said as well, in Germany or other countries, of course, as well, it's really more about redesigning right now, right? So you redesign whatever you talk about. It's about redesigning. And whenever I move in Asia, my feeling is that it's still more about inventing, trying to invent, right? To really try to experiment a little bit. The typical employed industrial designer today has no time to invent, right? You do mobile phones, you do it 365 days a year, every day you do the surface of a mobile phone, right? So very boring, very terrible, very disappointing, very frustrating in some way. So you don't feel like inventing something, you don't feel like creating something, you redesign, purely redesign, right? And I'm with you. I would say one day, or in one areas, industries, or groups, we definitely should still keep up with inventing something, right? And I think then you need skills, which can be craft skills among others, right? So I think your point is very, very correct, yes.
I'd just like to add one small point to that. You were talking about the responsibility of designers. And for a responsible designer, even if a lot of my students in the art and information area, they say, oh, I'm going to create a game. So these are immaterial, so there's no environmental consequence. I've had such discussion. But every time you say, okay, we have a new game machine, and the newest game for the new platform, you're causing everybody else to buy a new machine. And every time you run online game, there are many servers running behind. And there are many computers running 24 hours a day around the world using a lot of electricity. So somehow people lose the connection to the true material consequence of your design decision, even if it's a service, a very abstract thing. And so if you have a material connection, when you glue something together, or you know that you have to color a surface, and it means one more layer of paint, and that means something, different chemicals, different adhesion, even physical principle-wise, even before narrative consequence, the physical consequence, I think the handicraft is a way to really understand, like physically, that each design you do means a physical change in the world. And the better your design for the market, the more the consequence you multiply. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Okay, maybe we would like to move to the next question. Is we were told that there are fundamental principles to design. For example, harmony theory, color theory, and design theory that apply equally to all areas of design. And question, should a design degree and or design training course begin with a joint first year of study on the fundamental principles of design? I selected this question because we, in our new curriculum, we have that kind of classes. That's why.
Good question.
What do you think? Would you like to add something?
First, the students first.
When I was in second grade, I joined her class. That class is the design theory, but I couldn't understand what she did, what she said. At the moment, I totally cannot agree her opinion. But after the one or two semesters, I could understand what she did. So I don't know that's wrong or that's right, but that's my experience.
I'm sorry, or thank you, I'm not sure.
I think it's really similar to Germany because we also have a lot of theory in the first semesters and courses, but it's always just explaining. But the first time when I realized what color makes with the product was when I make it by myself and I had to choose the color. So the course should be like that I gonna try it and make it and then learn it. And the first time when I was here, I joined a few classes over here, also theory, and I felt like, okay, I cannot understand the language, so how can I learn something without doing something? So I think every theory, you have to do it and explain it.
That's right.
It's a very interesting question actually, but like if the question like should we or shouldn't we, I think yes, we should like teach these kind of topics like color theory and design theory, especially like also like history of design or history of architecture or theories of architecture, because these kind of like topics help students to understand the language of design, because like designers speak like in different language than other people or like market people. So these kind of topics are really important in terms of the language. What does proportions means? What does like historical scale means? What does human scale means? So these kind of like terms like is really important for designers in the next years. But the problem is, as Hiroto said, is teachers doesn't relate these topics to other other classes. For example, if I'm taking like a design studio, architectural design studio, and I'm working on designing a school, for example. So in this kind of design studio, we need to connect between what we studied in color theory and what we are doing in design studio. For example, when we are going to design the facade, don't forget to choose color plan as you learned it in the last year. So at this point, we start connect between what we studied last year and what we are doing this year. So this is the missing point, I think, and this is the
point. I think that's a quite valuable point. It's interesting because we hear from more and more students, of course I always mean international, right? So more and more students we hear, we learn too much theory, right? That's what many more and more students complain a little bit. They say, it's too much theory but not related to practical experience. So that seems to be an issue at schools in many countries. On the other hand, I really think, I would follow what you just said, I think this is something you have to keep up with because it differentiates the profession as a designer from other professions. The thing is you have to understand technology as well, right? If not, you cannot discuss with an engineer later. But the engineer doesn't have to understand design theory. So this is your advantage. So if you give up on that advantage, I think then it's more risky for the design profession to be replaced. So it's necessary, but I would agree, it must be closely connected to practical experiences and practices at least. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I have other questions related to this. Maybe it exists in the 80 questions, but I haven't read them.
Okay.
Yeah, the other question is, should we teach like designers like basic science? Because, for example, I studied 5 years architectural engineering. The first year was basic science, which is physics, mathematics, chemistry. Then like 4 years architectural engineering. So I didn't feel actually we should like take this 1 year, because I already in high school studied physics and chemistry. So why do I need like to get more of these kind of topics? I think this question is also should be somewhere here. Like, do we need like the basic? And I think also in Kyushu University, like first year student, freshmen, they go to Ito campus and they study like physics and chemistry. Then they come here to Ohashi. So does it make any difference if we? Because in some courses, like maybe in Europe or United States, they take like architecture degree in 3 years and sometimes in 4 years. So do we need like the basic science here? That's the question.
I'm not sure, but did you study the same thing, the same physics or mathematics which you studied in high school?
Yeah, but like,
there was a kind of difference.
It's kind of different in the practical like way. Like we go to labs and do some kind of experiments, and it's like much more developed than the high school. But I'm talking about in the next years, I didn't feel that, okay, what should I do like with this chemistry or this mathematics in architecture, like engineering? Maybe we need like still mathematics because we study some kinds of related topics. But when it comes about like chemistry, when it comes about like physics, I didn't feel that it will affect me too much. I thought that maybe like the knowledge of high school student would be enough at this point.
What do you think?
We have a system in Germany that when you already have you have done your bachelor and then you want to do your master, but in a kind of different of master topic, and you already have done some courses that also in a master, and then the system is saying, okay, you don't have to take this course anymore because you already done it in the bachelor. And maybe you could like have something like that. Like I've done something like that, so can you accept that? And the professor say yes, and then you just have to.
But this is from bachelor to master. What about?
It's just an example. It's just an example.
Yeah, actually, I think the problem is maybe since you have going to the university, you have I want to do design. But actually, some people since already they have in the university in the first year, but they don't know what they actually want to do in the future. So I think the course in the first year is meaning like it's almost the same for everyone, but still a very basic knowledge for that particular major. But it's have a time for you to think what you really want to do. That if you want to change your major in the next year, you can still keep up with the other majors. Not just that if start at the first beginning, we learn too much the things that you have to start with the first year to start again. I think maybe school has also that kind of thinking.
Okay, perhaps I want to just share what I kind of found out from, because part of my research is also to study what the other universities, like design universities, are doing, but more particularly in product design programs. But my data has been quite some years ago, because that was my research quite some years ago. So I realized whether it is in Politecnico di Milano or whether in Jumpstart or in RCA, maybe RCA no, because we have masters, but whether it's in China or Korea, Japan, Singapore, I think in terms of university education, there are kind of two components, which is the general education and then the professional education. And then in general education, it's more to develop the undergraduate, that means students as a kind of with general knowledge, and then of course to provide students with that general knowledge as more as a kind of personal kind of like general development. and then of course then that comes in the professional education. So there has been kind of always that kind of structure. But of course the question now is that do we want, is it time to restructure this kind of university education? Because I come from engineering background, and in engineering, I think I'm from Singapore, so in engineering, all the first year students actually do a general kind of engineering, kind of fundamental. So yeah, and then after that you break up to the civil engineering, mechanical engineering, and things like that. So, but of course, the question now is that for design education, do we need a kind of general fundamental principle? Perhaps is to provide all the design students with a kind of common understanding of certain knowledge. So that is like you know, if you are a chef in doing Chinese food or French cuisine or maybe Japanese cuisine. But the thing is that there is a kind of common language between them. So perhaps the fundamental principles of design may kind of address that kind of common language. But of course, I mean, this question number 12 may be related to question number 76 because whether is there a core in design education, right? Thank you.
Yeah, that looks like a very good connection. So, yeah.
I forgot that. Oh yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there was something I wanted to address in the way you chose this selection, and what I found very, very interesting in your talk was that you were saying there are some aspects which are easily accessible as a designer to make some impact in the market, and some issues are very hard because the market is like hard to establish or something like that. And even within our schools and many schools around the world are doing much more things like social innovation as part of the design curriculum. So maybe this kind of, or even advocacy as designers to make some larger societal change. And so that relation, like how do you think like designers can get some kind of maybe skill or some abilities to help transition such things that we think too hard to approach as designers, something that's not a good market for us, or maybe it's something like that. How can we help to make that change? Or what can designers do to impact that so that it becomes possibly a designable issue?
Yeah, if I would really have an answer on that, would be great. But of course I don't. But the thing is, at least if designers like it or not, but in some way designers are cross-discipline, right? I mean, more than other disciplines. Even if you don't like it, even if you say I'm a furniture designer, but in some way designers are more generalists in some way. And what we see, and in some way it's interesting, what we see is that the design profession is more and more seen like a consultant. So designers turn to be consultants because the industry has really many questions, and I don't blame the industry, don't misunderstand. I'm a big fan of all these kind of industries. But they have so many questions, but no answer to the questions. That means they urgently need answers. And it seems that designers can be one group, I don't say the only group, but one group, being able or capable to help finding answers. I don't say designers can only designers can find answers. This is too much. But I could imagine that designers with a wider knowledge, with a cross-discipline knowledge, with, again, the understanding of human beings. This is one of your advantages, that you should learn to understand how human beings function, right? How our empathy, our emotions, our feelings, right? This is what technical professions do not think about so much. They are technical, they are, let's say, innovation driven in some way, right? Driven. So yes, I think in some way you can, but of course you have to raise your finger. You have to raise your hand and say, hey, involve me. If you don't say anything, nobody will ask you. I had many discussions on Industry 4.0, right? The big topic, Industry 4.0. If you look at it, design doesn't play any role so far. That's an engineering thing, right? Why? Because designers never raise their hand and say, we can contribute to it. There is many areas where designers can really help to improve. Because it's about communication, right? Machine, human, machine, and so on and so on. It's really about exchange, safety, data safety, security, communication. There's so many design issues, but it's still left up to the engineers, because the designers, whenever I talk to design, say, nobody asked me. And I say, yeah, did you say something? No. And I said, okay, come on, nobody will ask you if you don't say something, right? So raise your hand and say, I can contribute to it, right? So this is the typical thing, right? Designers very often are not good in promoting their skills, right? You're very smart, very nice. Most designers, 90% of all designers I know, are wonderful people, right? But their capability is creation. It's not promotion or sales or marketing, right? That's not what you like. But in some way, I'm sorry, you have to get used to the fact that you have to raise your hand and say, hey, I can help. Right? If you don't do that, nobody will ask you, sorry. There will always be somebody saying, I don't need you. Right? We solve it by ourselves. We don't need designers. So please be a little bit more confident, right? And say, yes, I can. Right? It's really necessary. If you don't do that, I'm sorry, but yes, designers can contribute to it, maybe better than most other disciplines or most other professions.
Okay, then maybe we will plan the next time that kind of discussion. Yeah, to fighting marketing people and design. Okay, thank you very much for today. And we would like to have another session. I would like to give the mic to Yamashita-san to introduce about iF Design Hour.
Thank you very much for the moment.
Thank you very much.